Yo guys, and welcome back to another week of me building a self-tracking app in Svelte 5. And this week I continued working a little bit on the dashboard as well, but also some other things. So I implemented this little insights widget. It's supposed to tell the user if there are any outliers, if they are having a particularly happy day, or if they're perhaps taking less steps than usual and things like that. So we can actually test this out and see how it works. So if we just take a look at the analytics, we might look at perhaps the steps. The average daily steps here is 6,000. So if I want to create an outlier here, I could perhaps log a new value that is much greater than this 6,000. Maybe I take 12,000 steps for this day. If I were to save this now, reload the page, we can see that our steps test greatly increased compared to our average of 6,000. We can see that we have an 86.6% increase compared to our average steps. So this is one of the things that I implemented this week. And this can of course also have a different time scope. So if we want to see weekly average values instead, we could switch this out to be the weekly. And here we can see that we have even more interesting insights. Our steps was higher than our usual steps. Okay, this is actually test 2. This is the random variable, but we can see that we have a greatly increased calories, but my mood greatly decreased compared to the previous weeks and things like that. So this should hopefully be interesting to the user to see if they are perhaps having a better day than usual and figuring out the different insights about their days or weeks or even months. So this was simply done by calculating the average value of every single trackable that we have in the system and simply comparing the current value, the current date value to those averages and see how much it differs. So we find all of that. We use the mean value from the settings. So we have here the current value, which is the current timestamp, our current day or our current week, and then we compare it to the average. So this is error, so to speak, the relative difference in those values. We can see if this is greater than the threshold, then we want to add this as an outlier, as an interesting insight to the user. I also quickly implemented this range slider for numerical values, so it should be much easier now to select numerical values if you have a specific range that you want to select. And this was also very easy to implement with the help of this library called Svelte Range Slider Pips. So this is not a Svelte 5 library, but we can still use the legacy on-change event handler and it still works. It's still maintained for Svelte 5. So this is a really nice library that I could use to implement this range form field. I also added some more beloved drag and drop in the application. So now we can drag and drop these options. For example, if we want to reorder them, we want the 2 to come first or maybe the 5 to come first, we can very easily now reorder these items. And that was super easy to implement also with the heavy lifting that I did with this drag and drop container. All I had to do was simply plug in a drag and drop container component, specify what items I have in JavaScript that I want to loop over, simply have an on reorder finalized that just sets that current value, and then we just have a snippet that decides what HTML to display for each item. Something that I did have to configure though was the zone ID. So by default, the Svelte D&D action library actually allows you to move items between multiple different zones. And this was creating problems here in the form editor because all of a sudden I was moving this option into a question simply because it had the same zone ID. So I needed to configure the zone ID here to be a different zone ID so that I don't accidentally move them between different zones and add them in the completely wrong place. And since this drag and drop container also manages its own state, we of course need to just do invalidate items whenever we edited it, or if we deleted an item, then we just tell this component that it's time to update it and use the most recent value that it has sent in here in the prop. So now to the feature that I actually spent the majority of the time working on this week. It was actually this quick log input that we have here at the bottom. And this should be a way for the user to very easily log values. They shouldn't have to go into the trackables. If they wanted to log perhaps the mood and the steps at the same time, then they should easily be able to do that. So now if I press the hashtag, we can see that we get a bunch of suggestions for what to log. So maybe I want to log my steps, then I do that. I can also tab steps. Here it shows the form question. Here I can type in that I want to log perhaps 4,000 steps. And then we have test 2. Well, this is just a random value. I can enter that and we can see that this pops up here. So now we can go ahead and log other things. Maybe I want to log a tag. Maybe I want to log enthusiastic. I can log that. I can log this sleepy tag as well, like this. And I can also log forms, more complex forms. We can perhaps log this mood, which is quite difficult to implement. So here I can see the different options that I have in my mood. Currently 1, 2, and 3. So let's log 2. And then we can see the hierarchy. So we can see high pleasant, high unpleasant, low unpleasant. If I just go to high pleasant or maybe low pleasant, then we can actually see the different options. We're actually getting into the nested hierarchy of this question. So I can say that maybe I'm feeling content. And if I'm feeling content, yeah, that's good. Then I can enter that as well. And now if I press then enter, boom, we can see that this was logged. We can see that the steps were logged. We can see that this updated here. We can see that all of these things actually started popping up in the journal as well. So now we have a very easy way to log things quickly in the system. And this also works with keyboard shortcuts. So I can just do Control K. Maybe I want to log my hydration. Well, I'll just type that. How much did you drink? I drank 2,000 or maybe just 300. What did I log? Coffee. And boom, bam, that's logged. We can see that this works. So I implemented this with the name dynamic input. So I wanted to be able to reuse this perhaps in the future. So I created this dynamic input interfaces. We have dynamic input entities, dynamic input field, and dynamic input answer. So an entity in this case is something like mood or sleep or even tag. So we can have a form here where we can have a tag. And then each of these dynamic input entities can have multiple fields. We can have the form questions here specifically specifying how well did you sleep, how long did you sleep. Those are all dynamic input fields. They have IDs and names, and then they can also be nested. If you have a hierarchy field, well, then we can have a nested value here where we have even more fields that we want to use. All of that is then packaged and bundled up into a dynamic input answer. When we have pressed enter, that is what is being generated. We have answers to these actual form questions. And this component required quite a lot of string manipulation. It was quite tricky to get everything working properly by modifying these strings. So we have a bunch of utility functions, replace range. Most of the stuff happens in this on key down. This is where we look for things like backspaces if we want to remove a previously logged value. Here we also handle the tab when we want to accept a specific suggestion. Then we need to replace a range in this fat string with that suggestion. So then we have the suggestion start and suggestion end integers specifying the indexes for where in the string to look. And then we just append or add that suggestion in between there. On enter, we simply submit it. If we have an empty input, then we want to submit it and actually send it off. Otherwise, we also want to validate it. So if these answers are not correct, if you're perhaps trying to input a string into a number question, then that should fail it and not allow you to do that. And then here is where the most of the magic happens. This is where we process the current key that they input. We first try to find the current entity based on the name. So this is based on where the hash sign is. So we can find that value. You can see if we have an actual current entity. And if we do, then we might have more fields. Remember, we have these dynamic input fields. We want to show suggestions for those as well. So if we have more arguments that we want, then we need to find the current argument index, the current argument start, the current argument content, and things like that. This is if we have nested, for example, the hierarchy form questions. Those will have nested values that are instead separated with the pipe operator, so to speak. And then we also have a sub-argument index, sub-argument start. All of these decide what the suggestion start and suggestion end pointers should be. And then to do the actual searching, when we are actually inputting and typing things to find the best match, we're actually using a fuzzy search library. Instead of doing something like include or a very basic primitive checking, containing, we're actually using a fuzzy search. So we can actually type things like, if we were to do mood 2, I can actually do something like high PL EAScent. You can see it shows both high unpleasant, but if I were to do high un, then it will just show high unpleasant. So I don't need to type out the whole word. We actually have fuzzy searching, which is really nice. And that was implemented with the help of this nice library called microfuzz. So quite a lot of string manipulation, very difficult to get right. I'm sure it still contains some bugs, and it definitely needs to be refactored a little bit as well. It's a little bit unclear how everything is working, so definitely need to work a bit on this to make sure the code looks better as well. So then I also implemented this nice checklist widget to the dashboard. So we can have checklists with forms and tags. So I can check this medicine 2. You can see that when I check this, we actually get something logged. So how does this work? Well, we can take a look at it if we edit it. So these checklist widgets have some items, and these items are actually forms or tags. We have the medicine form. For this medicine 2 to be logged or to be checked here, it needs to match medicine 2 in the type, and the amount should be 200. So whenever I press this medicine 2, what is actually being logged in the system is precisely that. It is being logged medicine 2 200 milligrams. If I were to go to the journal and edit this to be 201 and save that, well, no longer is it going to show it as checked, simply because it doesn't match that form. I can go back though, edit it back to 200, save it, and now we can see that it's now checked. So it's all based, it needs to have an exact match. So this should hopefully be very useful to users if they have things that they log perhaps on a day-to-day basis, things like medicine. If I want to take these 3 medicines every single day, then I can just see that I have checked this off, and when I press this, it will log that specific value with the specific answers that I specify. We can also see that we have tags here, so if I uncheck this, we can see it's no longer checked, and this just corresponds to a very basic tag. If we take a look, we just have specified we want the enthusiastic tag to be logged. So this checklist widget definition looks something like this. We have these conditions where we can specify if we want to have a form or a tag. In this case, we have a form, then we want these exact values to be matching. We want this specific form ID, and for that form ID, we want this exact answers to be matching in the journal entry. The magic happens then with the actual dependencies that we have. So this checklist widget will create a bunch of dependencies. If we are listening for perhaps the tag, then we want to actually create a dependency on the tag variable that is enthusiastic. If we have the medicine 2, well, then we want to create a list variable that depends on the medicine form. So then we can get access to the actual answers. So then we here, for example, loop over, we find the form ID, all the fields that we are interested in, all the fields that we have answered, we are also interested in knowing about, so we can get access to those in the store. So yeah, based on if it's a form or if it's tag, here we have a tag variable and here we have a list variable, which will give us the actual answers from the entries themselves. Then we have this list variable that I was talking about. Then we get back a bunch of journal entries put in a list. Then we can loop over all of these journal entries and find their answers. Then we need to look at all of the answers that we have in the condition. And if all of these answers match with the current journal entry, then we can say that this current journal entry is a match. That means we have found a journal entry that exactly matches the specific answers. This medicine here exactly has medicine 2 as the type. It exactly has the amount 100. Then it is a match, and then we can simply return this entry ID. So now I can also press this to unlog it. Because we have an entry ID, we can very easily delete that journal entry as well. Something else that I started working a bit lightly on that is not completed is this reflections feature. So this is something that I wanted to have in pretty much every version of this app, but I never got around to actually implementing this. But reflections are supposed to be a simple way for the user to settle down and track multiple things at the same time. Maybe they want to track something in the beginning of their day. Maybe they want to track multiple forms, multiple tags. Then they should very easily be able to group together these multiple forms and tags into a single reflection, so they don't have to go all over the place and press all of these buttons. They can just start a morning reflection or have a notification on their mobile or something just to reflect daily. So it looks something like this. We have this morning reflection. We can reflect over how well did I sleep. We can type in how long did I sleep and how rested did I feel. I can go to the next one, show your gratitude. Start your day by showing some gratitude. I'm feeling grateful for the sunshine outside and things like that. So then I can go back, I can modify these, and then I can track this and save it. When I track that, we can see that it logs them both in the journal. So we can see that the sleep was tracked, but also the gratitude was tracked. You can also have the evening reflection. Here we have these table widgets. So this is after the day has passed. Perhaps you want to add some complementary tracking. Maybe you didn't track your mood completely during the day. So we can see that today I was feeling content. I was feeling option, which I'm not sure what mood that is. But the idea here is that you should be able to press this plus button to also track your mood, add more mood or things like that. We also have tags, like I said. If we want to track our tags, we can do that. We can track testing 1, 2, 3. I can also see the food, what did I eat today, and here I should also be able to add complementary if I forgot to track something, and then my evening reflection is done. We didn't have anything but the testing 1, 2, 3 to track. So for this we just have a reflection interface. This contains the name of the reflection and also all of the pages in the reflection, and these pages, like you could see before, have names and descriptions and also optionally an icon. And then each of the pages also can contain multiple widgets. So we can actually have multiple forms. If you want to have multiple forms on one page, we could perhaps have steps here as well in the morning reflection. And this will also work. We'll just put the other form underneath there. But yeah, we can have multiple reflection widgets on one reflection page. Then for rendering our reflection, we have a reflection modal. This is where we can do things like going to the previous and the next pages. In order to actually keep track of all the answers that we log, if we move to this page, we can see that this is being tracked. We're actually using answer states for that. So for each of the form widgets that we have, or for each of the reflection widgets that we have, we generate some states. So if we have a form widget, then we generate the answer states. And this answer state is then passed in the component itself. We take a look at the reflection form widget, we can see that we're actually passing in the state. We're passing in the reflection form widget answer state, which contains the answers. And this is also passed in here, of course, in the reflection widget renderer. So it finds the state for the specific widget ID and passes it into the component itself. And when we try to move to a previous page or to a next page, we actually validate the current page as well. So we want to validate perhaps that we didn't input a completely bogus value. If we are looking for a number value, we shouldn't be inputting strings, for example. And this also acts to actually propagate the correct values from the form widget. So if we do validate for example, in the reflection form widget, then when we validate this form widget, we actually update the state. We actually update the state because this form embed actually maintains its own state. It doesn't call an onChange event listener every time we type something in. It only does that when we actually want to log the form. So we need to validate this form. We validate and get the answers, and then we actually tell the parent component that this state has been modified as well. And of course, if we are not able to validate, if we did input bogus values, then we just return false. Then we're not allowed to track or log the reflection. We're not allowed to go to the next page because something is wrong in the form. But if we are able to validate it and we have reached the last page, so to speak, then we actually log this reflection. This just calls the reflection service. We get back our reflection widget answer states, and then we check these values. So if it's a form, then we want to actually log a form. Then we check the current form ID. We attempt to find this form ID, and then we just log it in the journal service. If it's a tag, well, then we just get all of the tags that we selected. If we have a look in the evening reflection, these are the tags that we selected. We selected testing 1, 2, 3 and ASDAF. Then those are the tags that we want to log. And then we just loop over all of these tags and log them in the system. So this should provide the user with a convenient way to track multiple things and reflect on their day. Maybe add things like complementary data that they forgot to track. And we can add things like notifications to this. I think that is something I will be focusing a bit on next week as well. And finishing up this reflection features, though, we can also have the tables here to actually add new values. So that is what I managed to cook up this week. Quite a lot of variation in the features that I was able to implement. So that was quite fun to do all of these different things. Hope that you guys enjoyed this video and that you maybe found something interesting out of it. Also, feel free to check out the code on GitHub if you want to see how it evolves, or join my Discord channel if you want to be part of the community that I'm trying to build. But other than that, I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.